Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low. So before we get into this article, just want to watch the video and try and explain or try and see why being a pastor or being a preacher, being someone who believes in the Bible, now put you in that box where you're referred to as being right wing. We see here in Australia, this is all about a supposed alleged right wing preacher who was talking out against smoking ceremonies, against the welcome to country that you have here in Australia. You have it all over the place. I know you have it in America and Canada as well. But talking about how really it doesn't go. Welcome to country is against what Christians believe, against what the Bible preaches. And as a Christian, you shouldn't be in support of welcome to country, especially not with the wording that I've heard of different welcome to countries. To me, some of the ones that I've heard, they really support worship of ancestors, animal worship, this kind of thing. So, listen, let's have a listen to this recording first, and we'll get into the article a bit more.
Yeah. So Dave, sorry to interrupt. Just tell us what you said. You're at a public meeting. You made some comment. What did you say?
What I said, they asked me why I'm not offended about, why I'm not worried or concerned about offending Indigenous people. And my answer to that was an explanation of the duty of Christians to preach the truth and gospel and to not mix Christianity with false religion, such as the Aboriginal traditional religion, which is bearing all the hallmarks of animism and paganism and inherently false beliefs, according to the one true religion, which is Christianity. Now, for a Christian teacher to say this to a Christian audience who came to hear Christian doctrine in a Christian church, which was ticketed event, it's bizarre that somebody would expect to be hearing anything other than Christian doctrine or the assertion of Christian doctrine. But that's the sum of it. This gentleman seems to be offended by an accurate comparison of Aboriginal religion to typical Indigenous religions, which have all the hallmarks of animism. Now, that's not even Christian doctrine. You ask ChatGPT, what is animism? And the resemblance to what is imposed on Australians all the time with smoking ceremonies, welcome to country, etc., is exactly the same thing.
So there you have it. That was the preacher, Mr. Pellowe, I believe you pronounce his name. So I'm just going to read part of the article that this all came out of. So Jacinta Price, she's defended Christian minister Dave Pellowe after he refused to do a welcome to country, as support pours in after he claimed he was prepared to go to jail to defend his rights. And he's correct. As he pointed out in that video, it's a Christian event, a ticketed Christian event. People come there to hear Christian doctrine. It befuddles me how someone who attends that event then allegedly becomes insulted, offended, because they had no kind of smoking ceremony, welcome ceremony, or something, or he talks about how it's against Christian values, Christian teaching, biblical teaching. Anyway, so Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Jacinta Price, says a Christian minister who refused to do a welcome to country ceremony before a religious conference should be allowed to express his opinion. Right-wing preacher Dave Pellowe. So, the right wing is now phrased, it's put out there as being a derogatory title. If you're described as being right wing, they put it out there saying, well, they want people to think, well, this in derogatory terms. You're some kind of lowbrow thinking, you're a lesser thinker, you're unable to really comprehend the enlightenment of modern thinking when everything is included, everything and everyone is included, no matter what the teaching, no matter where it's taking you, no matter how depraved it may be. You're not enlightened enough, you're right wing. So he's been dragged before the Queensland Human Rights Commission following a complaint that he didn't include the Indigenous ritual or a smoking ceremony before his national church and state conferences. One thing I'd like to point out, the Queensland Human Rights Commission, where were they when all the police officers, nurses, ambulance people, when they were all being harassed by their different departments because they didn't want to undergo a medical procedure, which is now deemed that that whole thing scenario shouldn't have happened that way. But they weren't there fighting, arguing for the rights of those people. The Queensland Human Rights Commission, they just, depends on the flavour, depends on what's going at the time. They stand up for human rights as long as it suits their narrative and what they think. Instead, I'll go on anyway. Instead, he read from Psalm 24, which says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the word and all who live in it. He founded it on the seas and established it on the waters." So that's what he read instead of smoking ceremony, all that stuff. Pellowe opted to forego the ceremony, claiming the Indigenous spiritual beliefs are at odds with his faith. So on Sunday, Senator Price, who previously said the ritual should be scaled back, she's told Daily Mail Australia that threatening Mr. Pellowe with legal action over religious expression was a threat to democracy. But you notice how it's Christians. It's only Christians that are being threatened with this kind of thing. You can get up and chant anything derogatory towards the state of Israel, about the state of Israel. You can chant whatever you want, river to the sea, all that kind of stuff. That's all fine. You can say whatever you want if you're of other religions, but Christians, no, 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 no. Well, obviously, you're not being inclusive enough. She goes on to say, "This is an example of the supposed right not to be offended being prioritized at the expense of freedom of speech." Now, we probably all realize that we don't have actual freedom of speech here. And basically the allowance of people to speak freely that we have had in the past in Australia is just slowly being eroded away. But we never actually had it in our constitution or anything. People should be entitled, she goes on to say, people should be entitled to express the fact that their beliefs might be at odds with another group's set of beliefs, regardless of which culture or people group are involved. This is simply what it means to value freedom of speech. Ms. Price said the legal threat was an unacceptable encroachment into freedom of speech, which has contributed to Australian democracy. But this is the problem with all this left-wing ideology. Left-wing ideology basically pushes for democracy to be eroded away because they don't want true democracy, and they don't want freedom of speech, anything that goes against their own ideology. It's only a freedom to talk when it lines up with left wing ideology, with their ideology. That's all you're allowed to have. And that's where our nation is going. She goes on to say, "We cannot pretend that our society will not suffer if we continue down this path of distorted priorities." So the Liberal senator previously has told media, "Welcome to country practices can be divisive and should be reserved for special occasions. There is no problem with acknowledging our history, but rolling out these performances before every sporting event or public gathering is definitely divisive." So as we just saw there before with that interview, so that was Pellowe talking to Mr. Shelton. So he's said that the original complaint came from a conference ticket holder. This is what I really don't get. Was this ticket holder just there to see what kind of complaints he could make? I mean, you're at a Christian conference. What was the purpose of you going to a Christian conference if then you're going to complain about someone getting up and pointing out that this smoking ceremonies, these welcome to countries, are at odds with your beliefs, teachings in the Bible. So, and if that's what you believe, well, then are you actually a Christian? What are you actually doing at the conference? So, anyway, so the ticket holder who appeared offended when he compared Indigenous beliefs to mainstream religion. They asked me why I'm not worried or concerned about offending Indigenous people, he said. And my answer to that was an explanation of the duty of Christians to preach the truth and gospel and to not mix Christianity with false religion, as such as the Aboriginal traditional religion. The complainant said he felt racially and religiously humiliated and vilified by Mr. Pellowe's comments. I'd love to see who actually made this complaint. He felt racially and religiously humiliated and vilified. I'd like to see this person. Is he actually an Indigenous person? Uh, I don't want to offend people, but is he one of these Indigenous people who, if you look at them, you wouldn't really tell if he's actually Indigenous? It's only because he tells you and tells everyone, here's the kind of person I'm talking about, the kind of person that you wouldn't have a clue. You would think this is just a European person talking or some other nationality, except for the fact that, you know, every time they go out, open their mouth, they have to tell you, I am an Indigenous Australian. Whatever. You can be proud of your Indigenous heritage. I'm all for it. But I think anyway, I'll keep going. I don't want to be insulting people. Uh so he said my answer to that was an explanation of the duty of Christians to preach the truth and gospel and to not mix Christianity with false religions. Um, So the minister vowed to fight the complaints on principle and said he was prepared to go to jail to defend his rights. I don't care if the penalty is $2.50 on the principle of it. I will not apologize for preaching the gospel. That's what he said. Now, obviously, we've seen this encroachment on our rights to speak freely within this country for quite a few years now. This all really started to Well, the path was set, the direction was set for our nation when when the mandates were starting to be brought in, and then people started to realize, oh well, so the government can actually just do whatever they want and make whatever demands they want of us, and then if we don't tuck our tail between our legs and do exactly what they want, well then they will make life extremely hard for us. So I'll remind you that when the mandates first came in Victoria, there was a pastor who was put in jail. He was arrested and placed in jail and left there for, I think it was a week, because he had the audacity to put up a post on Facebook saying that his church would not be closing. Would not be closing. I reached out to try and get an interview with that pastor. Um, and look, I understand why, but he was actually he didn't want to talk. He pointed out that he'd been given an order not to talk to the media, not to discuss anything with media. And to me, he was living. Well, I understand why he was fearful because they would put him in jail again. He just spent some time in jail, and so he had been threatened. Basically, don't talk to the media, otherwise things are going to get worse for you. Then we also had that other young lady who was pregnant at the time in Victoria, also, who'd made a post about the mandates, and then she had police knocking on her door just before 9 o'clock at night, threatening for her arrest, and then they charged her because of the post she'd made, and then those charges were hanging over her head for, I think it was like 18 months, a long time to have charges hanging over your head. And then when a wall finally went to court or was about to go to the court, well, then the Department of Public Prosecutions in Victoria, the police, uh, pulled those charges. So they allowed those charges to hang over her head all that time. And then just before it goes to the magistrate's court, oh, no, no, we're not going to charge her anymore. Just before that. So you can't move on with your life. These are the kind of despicable tactics that government and that police have been using for the last couple of years to silence people, to take away their freedom, their ability to speak freely. Is how I like to put it. Just another example, the slippery slope that Australia is going on, and you notice that this is an attack on Christian ability to speak freely, the Christian ability to speak freely in Australia. Absolutely despicable. And if we don't stand up for our rights, if we don't keep speaking out about it, the government will just continue to encroach further and further on these rights, or on our ability to speak freely within this nation. And it's an absolute disgrace. Shame on the Queensland Human Rights Commission for taking up this complaint. Shame on them. They should be hanging. They should be hiding their heads in shame. They would not stand up for people when they actually needed them to stand up against the government and the illegal mandates, and yet they go and attack a preacher for this kind of speak. Absolutely disgusting. Australia is heading, if not already, for the judgment, for God's judgment. That's my opinion. I'm Jay Fallon. Please let me know what you think and what we can do about it. I think we just need to all speak up against it and show our disgust with the Queensland Human Rights Commission and push back against this kind of rhetoric, against this kind of strong-arming, against our ability to speak freely in this nation. That's my opinion. I'm Jay Fallon. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope. They just fuel the desire that will take me higher. I'm on fire because nothing's gonna bring me down. Nothing's gonna bring me down. Nothing's gonna stop me now. No more demons to be done. No nothing's gonna just focus on the goal. Nothing's gonna stop me now. Nothing's gonna hold me down. Got my eye on the prize. Gonna sail the clouds and tears on side. Nothing's gonna bring me down. Nothing's gonna stop me now. No more deals to be done. No more selling out my soul just to focus on the goal. Nothing's gonna stop me